rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing advance Australia fair. When Callum Cook from Albion sailed to trace wise ocean o'er, true British courage bore him on till he landed on our shore. And here he raised old England's flag, the standard of the brave. With all her faults we love her, still Britannia rules the waves. In joyful strains and let us sing advance Australia fair. While other nations of the globe behold us from afar, we'll rise to high renown and shine like a glorious southern star. From England's soil and fatherland, Scotia and Erin fair, let all combine with heart and hand to advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing advance Australia fair. Should foreign foe outside our coast or dare our foot to land, we'll rouse to arms like sires of yore to guard our native strand. Britannia then shall surely know, though oceans roll between her sons, if fair Australia's land still keep their courage green. In joyful strains then let us sing advance Australia fair. Australia's sons, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing advance Australia fair.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the now weekly edition of the Uncuckables here Thursday night. We're on time, starting just past 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. It's the Tim, David, and Dave show. Which one tonight is going to be Dave and David?
You can flip a coin, I guess.
Oh, it's up to you guys. That's fine.
I'll be David.
David?
Yep.
So David is David Hiscox, and Dave is Dave Lee. You started off as the resident WilmsFront China expert, but you did D. Beltran's live stream a couple of weeks back, and since China's continuing to threaten and impose tariffs on us, it's the main, should be the main concern of our leaders and ordinary Australians. So it's a perfect week for you to make your Uncuckables debut, because you're certainly not cucked at all when it comes to China.
I guess by speaking out. No, I've been speaking out for years. So yeah.
Well, what I mean is you don't go through the explainer, defensive explainer, and that's actually going to be the subject of our entropy poll tonight. Please join us on entropy if you want to ask any of us, including Dave, a question. I'll put the link in the live chat. We're on the show YouTube channel and DLive. I'll try to monitor both of them. The poll is, which do you oppose? Do you oppose China or the Chinese Communist Party? Because Sky News commentators like Alan Jones say, oh, we're not against China and the Chinese people, we're against the Chinese Communist Party. We love all the Chinese people in Australia.
Yeah. That's well dissected there, Tim. You've basically summed up why it's very difficult to actually oppose Chinese influence here in Australia, because like even when a politician will try to like raise the issue, like they still have to do the dance. They still have to sort of go around in circles to actually before they're allowed to even make the point. And you tie yourself in knots that way. Dave, I'll just say welcome as well. It's great to have you on here. I've enjoyed your videos quite a lot. David Hilton will often embed your videos in his pieces. So I'm looking forward to having a good chat. Cool.
That's great. Oh yeah, I'd love to put my 2 cents into that. A Chinese person in China is a right-wing extremist, but as soon as they arrive in Australia, they become a left-wing liberal so that they can get their hands on our goodies and brainwash
or a neoliberal internationalist, because they're sort of there's the left, or what you'd call leftist globalism, and then there's right-wing globalism.
So like in Australia, I guess I'm a little bit more conservative, but I'm also I see myself as more of a left wing because my government is the Communist Party. So I'm a left wing looking for freedom for the white people and freedom for all, because we've been taken advantage of. But the Chinese people, they come here and they're very left wing so they can get their hands on our goodies. And they say, oh, look, I'm a good person. I want all these freebies and everyone should be given a fair go. And I should be allowed to become prime minister too, because I'm Chinese, and I should be Box Hill's, politician, local member.
Well, that's already happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I mentioned it. But yeah, then they go back to China. Then they become right-wing extremists. There's no left-wing people in China. But the same for me. As soon as if I went to China and China actually had all these goodies like healthcare and all the goodies that we do, I would become left-wing as well. It's just it's what I want. And so if enough Australians went over to China, they would all become left-wing extremists and fight the Asian Nazis, so they can get their hands on the goodies. That's just how it is. It's self-interest.
So, Dave, you were saying before, like you'd find it interesting for a psychologist to like go and ask the Chinese people like what they actually think of Australia and of Australians, just based on your work. Like, what do you think? How do you think they see us?
I know how they see us. I can tell you 100% how they see us. And speaking of a psychologist, one of my best buddies has a PhD in psychology. So all of my thoughts I run by one of my best mates, and a lot of them are confirmed. I do have biases and I do have a lot of things that I work through, but I want to get to the facts, the truth. So I'm always questioning myself. And you need to speak to people in, specific fields for that. But yeah, the Chinese people, they're here to get hold of a better life for themselves. And when they talk about, think about this. Here's a really good thing for your viewers to learn about Asian men in Australia. And this is not just Chinese men, this is Asian men in general. Now, Asian men in Australia, they have trouble getting laid. They do. They have trouble getting laid. They're seen as smaller and weaker than white guys. They feel inferior. They're a little bit intimidated. They feel smaller than, say, brown guys or black guys. They have trouble. They have a lot of trouble on Tinder. They have trouble. It's almost impossible for them to get laid in a nightclub. And all they do is complain about not getting laid.
I want to get because it's a few people have asked me to ask you this, and because you clearly see this the Chinese their not just hostility, but they want to control and loot Australia. That race is a key factor in it. And you talked about Tinder there, and obviously you've said that a lot of the Chinese have come over here for our freebies, and that's how you phrased it. But a lot do settle down and reproduce with the white European Australians. So it's not 100% as tribal as you see it. Where do you see?
What you're talking about? You might be talking about exceptions here.
Sorry.
You might be talking about exceptions here.
Yes, so I'm talking about, obviously, there's a large, Zoomers and even Gen Y are what are termed Eurasians.
I believe they're called happers.
So can you just explain where that fits into how you view this geopolitical conflict?
Myself, as well, it's not really geopolitical conflict. It's more the people within Australia. I guess we could go straight to my apocalyptic vision of the next 15 years.
No. Answer my question first. The race mixing miscegenation.
He's like a Rottweiler, Dave.
I get it. So what you're talking about is the race mixing, but I just gave you a fact, and the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of Asian men in Australia have trouble getting laid.
Yes, you've stated that. I'm asking to respond to. I don't doubt that fact, but does that come into? Is that part of your answer? Are you saying that? Because obviously that's common, but are you saying that also breeds resentment as well?
Of course it does. So imagine this: you have traveled all the way across the world to a country full of, in their eyes, barbarians, and you come here and you work really hard. You study hard. You have this. You feel like everything is against you. The people who live here are larger and a little bit more intimidating. The people do. Australia isn't a meritocracy, by the way. We don't let the best and brightest rise to the top. Look at Pauline Hanson. Look at some of our dumb politicians. Look at Scott Morrison. These people they're born into power, apart from Pauline Hanson, of course. But people like Scott Morrison, they didn't get there because they're good or they're intelligent. They got there because they had buddies. Now imagine if you came from China and you are far more intelligent, hardworking, conscientious, and you don't rise to the top, and you spend all of your days and nights working 6 or 7 days a week just to get ahead, and you can't get laid. That builds resentment. Men do need to find a partner. It's just natural. Also, China has 60 million surplus men. 60 million. Now, that's a lot of angry men. And I recently read a blog post by a Chinese men talking about why they should invade Hong Kong, kill all of the Hong Kong men and take all their women. Now millions of Chinese men believe this. And also people talk about China being isolated. It's not just isolated from the liberal West, it's isolated from all of our beliefs. It's a right-wing extreme nation from the top all the way to the bottom. Now, they're isolated from human rights, what is right. The feminism will never take hold in China. So all of the Australian women who have let Chinese to come in here, and they're worried about Muslims. Oh my God, we have the legal age of getting having sex. I think consent in China is 14. Now, I recently, as of this month, read of a Chinese guy buying someone's daughter that was an orphan or something like that. He bought her to adopt her. He paid mum or the parents who were poor to adopt her, and started having sex with a girl that was like 12, 14. This is #1 news in China right now, by the way. Because of the firewall, you guys don't see it, but I've got contacts in there feeding me this stuff. Now, he got away with it. He went to court and he goes, no, it was consensual. I started dating my daughter. Now, if you want to have an understanding on how the Chinese people think, you need to have understanding of what's going on inside that country. Now, people that go from that insular, firewalled country with 1.4 to 1.7 billion people, and they come to Australia, they bring those beliefs with them. And if they don't get laid, they want to overthrow Scott Morrison. They want to collapse the entire economy. Can you name one Chinese diaspora within Australia, one Chinese Australian that has condemned China for the sanctions on our country? Name one of them. Name one. Because they all want this country to fall to shit so that they can replace Scott Morrison. Facts.
Certainly not little Timmy Shitpossum.
Well, he's from Laos.
No, but he's of mixed Chinese and something else origin. Like he's actually ethnically Chinese.
Someone did? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I looked it up. It said it on Wikipedia. Like he's actually of Chinese ethnicity.
Yes, we got one.
Yeah,
we got one.
You mentioned you mentioned before, like the Chinese see us as barbarians. Do you think they also see us as suckers?
Yes, and we are stupid. I agree with them. We are stupid. We're very stupid people to allow them in. The liberal John Mearsheimer wrote a book about I think it was the liberal delusion, and he was talking about how stupid we all are just to believe this. The way. See, we're like maybe what 1 or 1.5 billion people who live in a civilized society, when like 6 or 7 billion people live without human rights. Who's eventually going to win? Look on our doorstep. We have 220 million Indonesians living in poverty. Like, that's not going to eventually come here.
Yeah, because it's interesting the way that you describe the way that Chinese people think. It's actually like similar to the way that Muslim people think as well. Like it's just like they preference themselves and they have a very hard-nosed attitude on how to run things and how to keep the civilization going. And like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, I think like most Westerners thought in a similar kind of way. To me, the answer is to act like, rather than saying, "Oh, look how uncivilized and backwards they are," to understand, look, it's only been the last several decades where we've rejected thousands of years of tradition and civilization, and like we've rejected the civilizational knowledge that's been passed down to us, and we've like turned our beliefs upside down. The rest of the world hasn't been as stupid as us. We've actually got to go back to thinking like the rest of the world, preference ourselves, be just as inward-looking and self-preferencing as they are, and that's how we'll actually be able to compete with.
Yeah, well, I think we have forgotten that the world is a zero-sum game. Yeah. Unless we have, see, when the United States promoted free trade around the world and making sure that each country focused on what they had a competitive advantage in economic terms, and just like a comparative advantage around the world to try and produce a surplus of goods, then that's partly why we have deflation, because we become so efficient as a human race, really. But what happened was we started printing money, and we started literally sucking money out of those countries that we signed the trade deals with. And the United States is right now, the United States, in my opinion, is to some extent the Soviet Union. They're going down that track right now. They're we've forgotten that, as Elon Musk said only a couple of weeks ago, he says, you forgot that we need to make things so that we have things. And he said it, it's so obvious. We collapsed the economy also because of a virus. And back in March, I spoke to Tim. Tim's gone at the moment, but I spoke to Tim back in March. I was going to fly out because January, everyone was worried about the virus, and I was scared about the virus. Obviously, a month later, I had enough data to realize that really it's not that dangerous if you're under 40. So I was ready to go on holidays and take advantage of the cheap flights and the cheap accommodation. I was going to disappear for 6 months while everyone's sitting at home scared. Yeah, like we've collapsed our economy. We've got that we need to build things. That's why people are talking about bringing back manufacturing as well. They're talking about that because what we've done is we've used this powerful currency to pay third world country slave labor wages so they can build it for us, which I, as coming from a powerful first world country, know that my goodies come from taking advantage of third world countries. But on the other hand, they need our investment too. So we're also spreading the knowledge too. So there's a lot of knowledge that we spread, but we're also taking advantage of them in the short term. But in the short term, we're also forgetting what gave us that privilege in the first place. And you look at the Australian politicians today, and they have no idea where their privilege came from. And what they're doing right now is selling out our future. They're totally destroying this country. And they're almost all idiots to the letter. I'm bipartisan, by the way. One Nation, Liberal, Labor, whatever political party, there's not one that is good out there. They're all idiots. Every single one. Yeah, I've had my sorry, Dave.
No, that's fine. There are so many, like, sorry if I was interrupting. Like, there are so many points which I could actually ask for the next tangent on. You've kind of brought it back to the issue of how globalization has actually ended up benefiting China. It's an issue that I made. It's a point that I made a few weeks ago, and Greg Sheridan has made it a little more eloquently today in the Australian. Basically, like we have allowed our industry to go to China. Like globalization was sold to us on the idea that, hey, we'll have cheap things. We'll have good. It'll be better for the consumer. It'll be better for competition because our local industry won't get lazy and they'll actually have to create better quality stuff. All that it's done is it's led to the deindustrialization of the West, and it's led to the strengthening of the biggest communist state in the world.
Yes, but if China wasn't such a hawkish country, if they weren't taking the South China Sea, we would continue trading with them. There's a lot of people out there in Australia saying cut off trade with China. Yeah, what? So we can destroy our country? We need to continue trading with China, but what we need to do is have more intelligent people. You see, China has sent their Chinese people to universities all around the world. They have become educated, far more educated than us. Then they're going back and they're taking that knowledge back home. During that time, right now we have some of the best universities in the world. And all I hear from our stupid politicians, and don't get me wrong, like I know this is taboo to say, look, okay, farmers or manufacturing, look, it's taboo for me to say that that's not as important, but I would love us to focus far more on science and having far more top-end intelligent people that can create things, and then we can take that technology and that knowledge and we continue to send manufacturing to other parts of Asia so that we can continue to have a powerful dollar and continue to have our place in the world. we need to be the most intelligent so that others can make things for us. When people talk about manufacturing, we kind of socialized our manufacturing in the past. It was all subsidized. It didn't work. The unions got their hands on our manufacturing and sucked it dry. We wouldn't have Qantas if the CEO of Qantas didn't fight back against the unions. We have a huge union lobby in Australia that are just parasites that suck on business. It is impossible to run a good business in Australia. By the way, some of our best medical suppliers, factories in Australia, were sucked dry by the unions and they had to leave for Asia. That's why we didn't have masks. That's why we're not manufacturing it, because the unions sucked them dry. Don't get me wrong, some unions are very good, like the CFMEU, because if you work in construction, surrounded by a lot of meatheads, and believe me, when I was 18, I started out as a construction worker in plumbing. At 18, I realized that it's dangerous. Bricks falling, poles and people welding stuff. It's dangerous. Unions are only good for two things. One, keeping people safe, but they exploit that and they destroy businesses. And two, limiting the amount of workers so that they can continue to have power. But if you have a look around, most of the unions are useless and they're actually taking it from the Australian workers and destroying the businesses and collapsing those businesses. And where do those businesses would rather go? They go to China or they go to other places. So when we're not manufacturing things, we need to have a close look at ourselves. We also need to have an honest conversation about that. I was thinking about making a video about Sydney buses and why they're going private. I dare say hundreds of the workers at Sydney buses, it's a big company, it's about to go private. I was thinking of making that video just to explain, because we need to have a good conversation. This is economics 101, by the way. There's not one economist in the world that agrees that in a safe industry, you have the union. They're just parasites, really. But the CFMEU, they're useful. Maybe if you're working in the mines or something like that, useful. But if you're doing something like in a factory, putting together medical supplies and doing this all day with air conditioning and a safe, clean environment, do you need a union? No. That money gets taken out of their wages. But yeah, we've taken a tangent. We're not even talking about China, by the way.
Let me continue the tangent here, because yeah,
I'll bring a tangent back to China in a little bit after this.
All right.
Based on something you said, Dave. But yes, you go to.
You talked about the unions making manufacturing unviable in Australia. The most obvious example of that is the car industry, and of course that was subsidized as well. Subsidies in the long run are unsustainable, and that is why our agricultural industry arguably is so good, and as we're learning now, exports so much. The same with New Zealand's agricultural industry. They got rid of all the subsidies and deregulation in the 80s and 90s, and you mentioned the airlines there, where even though Qantas is termed the national carrier, it's not owned by the government at all, and the Morrison government, they've been right to not succumb to pressure to bail out Virgin. So this is the sort of I'm not sure sort of when it comes to pure free market libertarianism you are, but that is what makes, say, a nation strong. And there's plenty of useful idiots in Australia who've shot our industries in the foot to benefit China, like the car industry and the parts, of course. Where do they outsource to? The environmental regulation, when it's unviable or you can't log wood chips here, of course, where do they get that from? It just doesn't just magically disappear, the demand.
I guess each individual industry, each individual company, and each individual problem needs to be solved in a logical way. And the best way to focus on that is it making a profit, and how can we make it as productive as possible? That's the problem. Productivity is everything, and when you look at a lot of Australian businesses, they're very top heavy. The Australian government is top heavy. You have people that don't do nothing. They're just sitting in offices doing nothing.
Well, they've
They're
never run a business or had a professional job. They'd probably include staffer or a consultant as a job.
Yeah, there's a lot of top-heavy businesses with managers that don't really need to be there. Like for instance, Elon Musk is a genius. He literally next level genius, right? If you have a look at Tesla compared to Holden, I believe at one stage Holden was buying motors. The engine was like an Opel engine or something from Europe somewhere. Elon Musk, what he discovered was it was easier to manufacture every part of Tesla in America. Each little single part, even a bolt, it's all made in America. It's not made abroad. That Tesla car, every piece of it is made in America. Now, that's an intelligent man looking at each piece of a car and figuring out how to manufacture it in the most efficient way possible. And he had the money and the intelligence to do that. Now, when you have a look at Australia, we're like, okay, well, where can we buy a motor from? Okay, we'll buy it from the other side of the world, and then we'll connect it up with this. Nothing real. Well, there weren't many parts of of Holden that were actually made here. Tesla, almost everything in Tesla, and you guys can look it up. You can Google it. There's actual long documentaries on how Elon Musk did this. He discovered that making every part of that car was cheaper, and it's all. He only has 7,000, I believe, 7,000 Chinese workers in China right now, manufacturing cars. But the rest of them are all in China, I believe. In America, I believe. He has a lot of factories in America.
So how is it then that? Because I'm glad you brought this up, because how is it then that it seems to be the consensus that it's cheaper and more efficient to source your material from all over the world? Like you're saying, Elon Musk has said, look, it's actually, we can do it all here. It's much easier.
Yeah, and it's in America.
But
in America,
what we've also
labor markets.
Elon Musk has he's proven that you don't need a globalization all the time, and I think this is the trap that some free market pro globalization people are falling into, is just being apologists for every outsourcing operation that there is. They just say, outsourcing, that's because they want to make their products cheaper. They want to be more efficient. And one of the stupidest retorts they have to what about the local Zulu jobs, they do, they'll just reskill and find the other jobs elsewhere. They're just sort of, there'll be a happy ending there.
Well, to answer the question how Elon Musk did it, he has patents on how he did it. And you know what he did? He opened it up to the world for free. Why? Because Elon Musk cares about the world as a whole. It's free. You don't have to buy it. It's all out there on the internet. So this is the type of guy that I would like as Prime Minister of Australia. And I'm sure there's a lot of Elon Musks in Australia that are not getting a shot to rise to the top of Australia, because we have this 1% corrupt, aristocratic, moneyed aristocracy. I can't even pronounce the word, but it's a moneyed, corrupt elite. And Scott Morrison, in my opinion, is one of the most corrupt people on earth. Like this guy grew up in a family, a middle to upper class family. Mummy and daddy paid for him to go get his economics degree. And then afterwards he wanted, mummy, can I have some more money? I want to go to Canada and study some more. And daddy's a copper. And daddy's like, hey, look, I think it's time you get a job. You're almost like mid-20s. You know, this is the family that Scott Morrison grew up in. And international politics is gangster. Scott Morrison has no personal experience with being ripped off, sneaky people ripping him off. He's always had this protection of, oh, well, look, daddy can protect me because he's a copper. We have a lawyer that can protect my business. We have all of these, you know, he's not prepared to be our prime minister. And almost all of them are not prepared for this. They're not ready for this.
That would explain a lot of his boomerisms. Taking it back to Elon Musk, it's actually a real delight for me to have somebody who's a fan of him on one of these live streams, because none of the guys who I'm good friends with, and they're very smart and they're very critical of Elon Musk. I've always been a big fan of him. I think he's smart enough that he understands that the Earth has a habit of killing most of human life every 11,000 years or so, and he understands that we actually need to become multi-planetary. What argument do you make to counter the argument that's made that he's just another crony capitalist who takes money from the government?
Oh, well, he I believe, well, firstly, he's a genius. I think we can agree on that. Do people just agree with that he's a genius? Yes. Maybe an evil genius.
He's one of those, what is it, eccentric geniuses, which a lot of successful and creative people, they have quite eccentric personalities. That was a key takeaway from Seinfeld's The Suit Nazi episode.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk had a bad upbringing. He also had an abusive father, I believe. I read his book. It's not here. It's somewhere else. I think I threw it out or gave it to someone. But he had an awful upbringing. And so he understands that there's malevolence in the world. People like Scotty Morrison have never been even slapped around the face. He doesn't understand how bad the world is, you know, so it's peace and love and goodwill until, you know, we get invaded. Elon Musk understands that. But Elon Musk, on the other hand, when he started to make, he had a surplus of, I believe, $150 million, something like that. And what he did was he put it into SpaceX, knowing that he was going to lose all of that money. And that was a philanthropic mission of his own. That's $150 million, something like that, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. The numbers might be a little bit off. But he wanted to build, I believe he bought some old Soviet Union ICBMs. And what he wanted to do was just launch them and then create a marketing campaign around that as to try and reignite the space missions of the 1950s and 60s. You know, people were enthusiastic about that, and he was willing to throw away that much money. And he thought that these rockets were just going to explode. But what he was going to do is to say, look, I just threw away all this money. Can we all get together and maybe, you know, build something and get back to the moon, or maybe get to Mars? And this is my vision. But he was willing to throw the money away on a bit of a marketing campaign for the greater good of humanity. Now that's not, I guess the part of the problem with Elon Musk is that he is unfiltered. To some extent, I'm a little bit unfiltered too. I'll tell you how it is. But Elon Musk will just tell you straight up. And he's like recently Elon Musk was at a conference, and he was with, I believe it was the United States Air Force. I think there was a general in the United States Air Force. and what happened was they were talking about, fighter jets. And Elon Musk just said to the guy, he said, no, well, fighter jets, Top Gun style. You know, you guys know Top Gun 2 is coming out soon. I'm actually
really?
Top Gun 2 is coming out soon, but he was talking about how we need these new F-35, and Australia just bought some of those, by the way. But Elon Musk just told him and said, no, fighter jets are obsolete. He just told it straight to his face. Your entire career is obsolete now. Why? Because they have hypersonic missiles and, rockets that can just shoot down any F-35. And that's the problem with Elon Musk. He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's just going to tell you the facts. And to some extent, it is a fact. They are obsolete. They can be shot down. And China has a lot of hypersonic missiles. And that's where he gets that eccentric reputation, because when he knows a fact, he just tells it to you when he's unfiltered. And I think that's refreshing.
Whose Windows notifications keep going off there? I think it's yours, Dave, not you, David, because you're just on an iPad.
Yeah.
Are you able to disable those? We've got a question here on entropy. If you've got a question or want to send through a super chat, I'm putting the entropy link throughout the chat. This is from James Boom. Dave Lee, are Australian universities compromised by their reliance on Chinese students? What are we getting out of this relationship, because we can't even train enough of our own doctors? I'm not sure if it's the same for you. This is me adding my bit in Sydney, but even where I live in the southeastern suburbs, most doctors' clinics, doctors are about 50% non-white, and they're already talking about as part of getting Australia back to work is getting the foreign students back in.
The universities are corrupt, 100%. They are owned, run, and they're built, by the way. The universities, there's new faculties built, new buildings built in almost all the universities, and they're all built on Chinese money. So what I hear from people quite often is, well, the world's run by money, and those bankers create wars, and they know that in one side of their brain, but on the other side of their brain, they say human rights and blah blah blah, and everyone should get a fair go and all this other bullshit. No. The world is run by money, people. And if the Chinese people run our universities, they control the universities. Fact. Look at Drew, Pavlov, right? He's being kicked out, and he's as left as they can get.
Well, he wants to free the refugees. He has been at one of the Brisbane detention centres, and I think even on Sky News he wore some pro refugee shirt. That story's been in the news, but it's hard to even make sense of what disciplinary tribunal he's in front of. Universities, they have their own. It is a kangaroo court system. I know that Bettina Arndt and Senator Amanda Stoker have put some scrutiny on their sexual misconduct tribunals. Drew Pavlov, he's being represented by Tony Morris QC, who's the same lawyer who defended Callum Thwaites, the QUT 18C student. But that was it wasn't just obviously he's the one that's been targeted the most, but that was in the middle of last year, when all of a sudden these pro-CCP Chinese people came onto the campus and started just whacking people.
Yeah, if you're not at the round table, you're not part of the conversation. So my message to all the Australian people living out of the CBD, and believe me, I live in the CBD, there's no Australians left. I'm the only Aussie walking around. Most of you Aussies, if you're out there, I can't... I'm speaking to two Aussies here. I can hear, you guys sound and look Aussie, right? There's none in the city. None. Now, where the hell are you? Because the baby boomers sold out the CBD to go live out in the bush somewhere, and they've relegated the next generation of Australians to being uneducated. You know, there's universities out there. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of universities out there, but the best universities are in the CBDs. You know, UNSW, Sydney, Melbourne University, they're in the CBDs. Where the hell are your children, and what are you doing? And then that comes into the next part, what you said, Tim, about the doctors. We don't have any doctors because they're out in the bush somewhere, smoking weed, climbing trees and shit, and their parents haven't put together enough money and sent them to the CBD. Send them to the CBD, get a 2-bedroom apartment, put 5 Aussies in there, and study, and do it now. Because what are you doing? There's none in there. And if someone from a third world country can do that, that's the problem. Easy times create weak men. And if you can't leave the country and come to the CBD and put 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and whenever the real estate agent comes around, just go hide out the back, there's something wrong with you. You're weak. You're too weak. And therefore, this country is going to fall apart. We need Aussies to go back to the universities, get a degree, fight for jobs, be competitive. Don't just sit back and expect the government to print money and save your ass. You got to get off your ass and go to the CBDs. I'm in here battling away. Where the fuck are you guys? You know what I mean? Like, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you recall the last politician who said something in a more milder form than you did, and that was Michael Daly, the New South Wales Labor opposition leader. That was that leaked tape of him saying that our children are being replaced by Asians with PhD. That was a week before the election, and it was also a couple of weeks after the Christchurch massacre. And so any form of sort of xenophobia was immediately jumped on and vilified. And well, we know what happened to him. He lost the election. He might have won, and it just disappeared.
Yeah, well, it's 100% true, but the thing is, we need to, have a close look at ourselves, and why don't we have enough PhDs? What quite often happens is we have people from third world countries that literally come from the dirt. They get themselves a scholarship to come to Australia, and they work their ass off. They get themselves a PhD, and what do? They go back to their third world country and become the elite. While the Australian people sitting around going, "Oh, when's the next football game on?" We just go into the city and start fighting for your rights. The reason why all of these crazy ideas from people from abroad coming here and they're left wing, it's left wing, right wing. People have incentives. If you come from abroad and you can get free money, you're going to use that to your advantage. And that's what's happening in the CBDs. And now we're at the point where there's more people from overseas that can pull the strings. And the Australian people are non-existent. I don't know where the Australian people are. I don't really see them. I don't know, what's going on. I spend most of my time talking. And this is why when I talk about Chinese people, it's because I spend most of my time talking to Chinese people. You have a panel of Chinese people here, and I tell you that this country is going to fall apart and they're going to replace us and there's going to be a genocide and everything. They'll totally agree. Where's the Australian people?
I'm glad you said, come back to the CBD. A number of my good friends have said, look, David, you've got to get out of Melbourne. But there are a few things. I look at what's going on with the rest of Australia and how the government is trying to push refugees out to the rest of Australia. And they're basically trying to make it so that there's no place to white flight to anyway. And I kind of see myself, if I was to leave Melbourne, I would be a refugee and I'd become everything I was against. What you're talking about there sort of ties into a phrase that you used about half an hour ago, which I found quite interesting. You talked about how the Chinese, they send people here, they get educated, and then they take that knowledge back to China. This is a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but do the Chinese people who come here see themselves as Chinese Australians, or do they see themselves as Chinese?
To answer that, China is a civilization. There's no such thing as the Chinese people and the Chinese Communist Party. This is a myth created by stupid white people. China is a civilization. China, for over 4,000 years, China has risen and collapsed, and then risen again 4 times, maybe 5, 6 times if you count smaller little empires. China's a civilization. Why would they be proud of a bunch of drug dealing, football playing barbarians down in Australia that print money and do nothing but stupid shit? I would be so proud to be from a civilization, you know? So anything that these people tell you, oh yeah, Aussie, Aussie, flag over the shoulder, it's a lie so that they can get hold of your goodies. And then later on you realize China's a civilization. And the reason why China keeps rising is because if you look at how China keeps rising throughout history, 4,000 years, maybe longer, and it keeps rising. There are a lot of Chinese diaspora, people from like Hong Kong or Taiwan that are a little bit disgruntled, but this is how the civilization keeps getting torn apart. But we're at the point where this civilization is rising. And if you have a look at China, we've gone through a period of growth and prosperity that China has never seen in those 4,000 years. So if you accurately go back, all of those rising civilizations have never risen to the prosperity that this current civilization has risen to. And if you are of Han Chinese descent, that's something to be proud of. And I'll tell you something else. This is not just people from mainland China. Now, if you go throughout Asia and you go to every CBD in every city in Asia, Kuala Lumpur, you go to Ho Chi Minh City, you go to Bangkok, Manila, Jakarta, who runs those CBDs? Han Chinese descent people who live in that country, who were born and bred maybe 5 generations. Just say, for instance, Jakarta, Philippines.
Yep.
They can't speak Mandarin. They've never been to China. They can't remember where their ancestors in China came from. They have no connections to China, but they look Han Chinese. Now China, the motherland, has risen. And what do you think all those people in those CBDs are now saying? If you're in Kuala Lumpur, if you're in Ho Chi Minh City, you speak Vietnamese in Ho Chi Minh City, you hate China to some extent, but deep down, your civilization has risen again. And these are people that have no connection. Yet in Australia,
you really think that's the case? Because Penny Wong, for example, she's Malaysian Chinese. I don't think she's ever considered herself to have any loyalty to China. I mean, but
she doesn't have any loyalty to Australia, does she?
Oh, well, she has actually. This time, she is one of the Labour China hawks who's backed the calls for the independent investigation into the origins of the coronavirus. But on my WilmsFront program a couple of weeks back, I had Marcus Fu on, who is of Malaysian Chinese ethnicity, and even though he's a naturalized Australian now, he sees his connection to his ancestral connection to Malaysia, not to China. Like he went back to Malaysia during the summer holidays, even though he's of Chinese ethnicity. That's as far as he considers his roots to go. So I'm just putting a counter to what's your reasoning for this hypothesis? Like, obviously, I know you've spoken to a lot of people of Chinese ethnicity. Has it come from that?
Yeah. Okay, so it's not a hypothesis, it's a fact. Now, you mentioned Malaysia. I'm going to go deep on Malaysia in 1 second, but I want to complete the thought that I was just going through before. And that thought is all of the CBDs throughout Asia, those people were not proud of China before when China was poor. They were not proud of China. But now China has risen. One thing that you will notice in every city in Asia, every city, people of Han Chinese descent are now, even though, as I said before, they've never been to China, can't speak Mandarin, don't have any connections to China. If anything, their country is kind of at war with China. They're now starting to tell their friends, their family, their business partners that they're Chinese Filipino, they're Indonesian, they're Chinese Indonesian, they're Chinese Malaysian. China is now number one. And then when you ask them, you say, but you're Chinese Malaysian? How does that make sense? Have you been to China? No. Do you have any family in China? No. Can you speak Mandarin or Cantonese? No. Have you even been on holidays to China? No. But I'm of Han Chinese descent and I'm proud because my civilization has risen. You need to understand this. And this is a fact. Now I'll move on to the next part of that, which is Malaysia. Now, why would someone like was Penny Wong born in Malaysia, by the way?
She was, but she's a sole Australian citizen. She never got caught up in that dual citizenship saga.
Perfect. I'm not a newbie to this topic. So we'll go deep on, we'll psychoanalyze Penny Wong in depth, okay? Imagine if you were born in Malaysia as a Han Chinese person. How old is she? 40?
She's in her 50s now, I think.
When did she leave?
I'll look it up. You keep going.
Okay, so I'll tell you how Malaysia treats people of Han Chinese descent. You see, Malaysia's smart, and I like Malaysia's model. And I would like I like Australia to take on this model. Now, if you are of Han Chinese descent in Malaysia...
She moved to Adelaide at the age of 8.
Okay, so she probably didn't receive a lot of discrimination in Malaysia. But maybe her parents are of Han Chinese descent as well. She's probably not too mixed, right? If you have light skin, Han Chinese descent in Malaysia, the Malays don't give you scholarships. They don't give you any goodies. You don't get any of the benefits. The Malays get the benefits. They actively protect the Malaysian people from the Chinese diaspora. Even if you're born there, but if you are Han Chinese descent, they don't give you any goodies. Why? Because Asians understand that Asia's there for thousands of years and they know their history and it's passed down. Only the stupid Australians that have been here 250 years are stupid enough to believe that we are going to continue to control this place. But I'll tell you that the Han Chinese Malaysians, they constantly cry out about racism in Malaysia. But when you look at Malaysia, the Malaysian people are just protecting their own people from this massive behemoth of a country on their doorstep. And they should, because China is a very vicious country. Now, what we do is we're stupid enough to allow people of Han Chinese descent in and believe their bullshit. It's all lies. It's all lies. My girlfriend's Chinese. From mainland. You think I don't know what I'm talking about? I go in the city, I speak to mainland Chinese people all the time. I'm like, I know, I got it. I spend my time talking to them. This is a fact. So Penny Wong, her parents probably were discriminated against. They came here for the goodies and became a left wing, right? Please, free goodies. and they came to Australia to get all those goodies, right? And if you ask Penny Wong, Penny Wong would definitely agree that the Han Chinese people are discriminated against in Malaysia. So she's had a far better rise to the top in Australia than she ever would have got, living in Malaysia. And in my opinion, she stole a position in Parliament from an Aussie.
That's pretty. I would say bold statement.
Tim's stuttering. That's good. I did a good job.
Where do we want to go now? Oh, because David and myself, we're Victorians, so Daniel Andrews has signed us up to the One Belt One Road program, and our treasurer Tim Pallas said that the trade tariffs were a result of the federal government's undiplomatic conduct with China, basically. And I've noticed this, they don't explicitly take China's side, these, well, a lot of them are secret Chinese apologists, but they say that it's our fault for making China this way. They don't agree with China, but it's always our fault if China is trying to threaten, bully, intimidate us. And so this One Belt One Road, there's been a lot of talk about whether it's constitutional, but state governments can enter into trade agreements. Just give our audience a refresher about what it is, because we hear about it all the time, but it's basically like a global infrastructure program. Dave, you there? I think he's frozen.
He's frozen.
Maybe he just did the mic drop there. I hear he is now.
He's back. He's back.
Did you catch that?
Hey, how you going? Sorry, I missed that. So the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, just sort of elaborate on what that is.
So this is part of my old theory a very long time ago. This is when I started to worry about China. Was they have a rising economy with a GDP per capita, I believe, that just reached 10,000. Now, this is a country with a huge population that needs work. Now, in the past, communist countries have become insular, and they've just done infrastructure builds within their country to try and give their people work. Now, the communist government, obviously, the CCP, they obviously want to give everyone jobs, like every government. And myself, I don't see, each, the race of the country or the, whether it's democracy or whatever, the governments generally have an obligation to the people. You need jobs, you need healthcare, you need all these things to keep the country going, right? And they started building these ghost cities that no one was going into, right? And then they came up with a plan, which was a genius plan. What we will do is we will give a country outside of China a loan for an infrastructure build. We will build it, and you pay us back for building it for you. So what they're doing is they're exporting work. Plus, all of the risk of that loan is on China's shoulders. So they lose money, but it's the same as building a ghost city within China, okay? Then they started thinking, okay, well, we've got all these third world countries defaulting. What if we try to build a port for a country, and if they default, we take the port, right? And that can help us export. this is an economic rise by a country that's trying to give jobs to their people. And that's why we have so many of them down here trying to overtake Australia, because they want our jobs and they're taking our jobs. Michael Daly was right. And the stupid leftist, I don't know who yelled it, fired the guy, but he was right. So China has 1.4, but some people believe there might be 1.7 billion people within this country, by the way. They all need jobs. The Belt and Road Initiative is partially a way that they can export jobs, right? And it's also a form of colonialism. So they can overtake your port. They can overtake your road. Next thing you know, you have to pay to use your own port. You have to pay to use your own roads. This is a way China can continue to get rich. So, but if you guys want to know a little bit more about it, Morgan, I've got a guy who I interviewed on my channel, Morgan, who's down in Melbourne right now.
Yeah, I've met him a few times, Morgan Jonas.
Yeah, he's put a lot of time and effort into that. He had a protest, I believe, last year. He was going to have another protest, but because of the pandemic, thanks to China. But yeah, he's going to have another protest about it as well. The problem with the Belt and Road Initiative is that the Australian people don't get jobs. But you know what the sneaky thing is? After speaking to Morgan, the construction companies are owned by Chinese people in Australia that have Australian citizenship. Who do you think's going to get the contract? Huh? Who do you think's going to get the contract? The Aussies? No. The Han Chinese Aussies that have connections to the CCP, and they're going to build things for the Belt and Road Initiative. That's where the money's going.
That was an amazing little Easter egg you put in there. What's the theory behind the idea that China could have 1.7 billion people?
They're undocumented.
Yeah.
Undocumented
Chinese, not undocumented migrants. We're talking about undocumented Chinese.
Undocumented Chinese, born Chinese that roam around the cities and they don't have any formal documentation.
That would be quite incredible if that's the case.
Well, if you go to, say, a CBD in China and you're from outside of that CBD, you have to go to the police office and tell them your name. You don't need any ID. You say, my name's Xi Jinping and I'm from Wuhan. Can I just have a card? They give you a card and they write it up. Now, part of the reason why they started this surveillance state is because they don't know how many people are actually in the country. So this is something that people are not telling you, but that's why everyone will be documented once they're all on WeChat, and their IDs will all be online. And also then they'll have a better understanding of how many people are actually in the country, because parts of China are so backwards. They're so backwards. They're eating, we know they're eating some random things, right? There's undocumented people. So there could be 1.7 billion people. It's definitely possible.
You're talking about 400 million undocumented people, possibly.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just want to, because we haven't gone in deep to this. It's clear from what you've said that you don't believe that Chinese migrants to Australia are Australian, and they don't consider themselves Australians, and you've disparaged the sort of the she'll be right bogan Australians, and that we only have a recent history. So what is an Australian to you, and what is how should we define this country and defend it? That's what I want to get at now.
Well, I guess there's a question that needs to be asked. Do we want the current politician and liberal order that we have in place in Australia to run Australia? Or do we want a Chinese-led new order? that's a decision that we need to make. And I believe that we naively think that we are going to have the Scott Morrisons running the country with our Anglo-Saxon connection to America and Britain, and that's going to remain forever. But I'm going to tell you right now that that is not going to remain forever. And we are surrounded by 2 billion Asians on our doorstep that will make impossible to remain. Impossible. So we need to make a decision. How are we going to navigate the future of Australia?
Well,
And
let me go in deeper now, because obviously the Asianization of Australia began with the dismantlement of the White Australia policy in the late 60s. Do you believe that that was a mistake? Even under Sir Robert Menzies, there was a foreign student program, but I'm asking you a direct question. That change in policy in Australia's history, was that a mistake in your view?
It's very complex because we are surrounded by a lot of people who are now rising. We have to deal with the billion Asians on our doorstep. They're our neighbors. We have to trade with them. We can't isolate ourselves off, or we become the Soviet Union. Now,
but you said
to some extent,
that we shouldn't trust them with our decision making, even somebody like Penny Wong.
I never said this was going to be easy.
I'm scratching a bit more now.
No, I never said that the Scott Morrisons. I just told you that Scott Morrison. Well, why am I so outspoken? Because since we started allowing people into this country, we told ourselves that we are racist. We told ourselves that we need to behave, but we never told the immigrants that they need to adhere to our laws, our belief system, or get out. So what happened was they came here and they brought their own belief systems secretly, and they will eventually overtake it. It's just how it's going to play out, and there's nothing the Australian people can do about it. So if anyone's sitting there,
we could give them a bloody nose. That's the thing. Like, there's going to be a reaction at some stage. Like, it could be too late. Yeah. But eventually, Australians are going to realize, hey, we've been lying to ourselves. Yeah. It may be something like Warhammer 40K, where it's like 10,000 Australians versus 1 million orcs. There's only so much a small number of people can do, but like, there is a distinction between Australians and Asians. Like that's an important point to make.
Well, they look different.
Yes, like we were Australian before the White Australia policy was abandoned. The problem is now, like, it's what you're arguing now, basically, like, just because of sheer numbers, there's no way of turning it back.
That's exactly what I'm telling you. That's exactly what I'm saying. There's no way to turn it back, and our politicians are not going to make the hard decisions because the international backlash would be too severe. What I would do is start playing defense, and we're not even thinking about that. If, as Tim mentioned before, Alan Jones, we got these people who are new to the game that have no idea. There's so many baby boomers that have no idea, that haven't even thought about this, and they come out and they Google a few things, and they come out and they start discussing this. What is happening right now is there's a shift in power. Now, what America talks about is the Chinese people versus the Chinese Communist Party. We love the Chinese people, right? Now, the whole idea behind that is a malevolent secret plan. The malevolence behind that plan is we want to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party to give the Chinese people their freedom. What that's code for, again, is we want to destroy their political structure and then cause chaos in the country and have all the Chinese people suffer. Do you think they're stupid enough to fall for that?
Well,
No.
so they don't want to basically be in charge themselves.
They
Be-
are.
no,
That's what.
I'm talking about the pro-China democracy Chinese in Australia. Do they just want a different form of governance in China?
I think this is something that the Australian people are going to see. Look, I can talk about this for ages, and I'm going to try to simplify it in the best way possible. This is a civilization that values stability. Okay? This civilization does not want to be destroyed by democracy. They need a strong leader, top-down leader, to control the place. Okay? Stability is the key. They don't care about democracy. In fact, most of them don't want democracy. Whenever they hear democracy, they hear the American hawks trying to destroy their country. Now, this is a new thought for the Australian people to try and wrap their heads around, but I'm telling you, this is the facts. This is how it is. They value stability.
I get the impression, because we've probably penetrated your thoughts to a deeper level than probably most. I feel that's a lot of your subscribers and followers, they maybe only understand you on a superficial level.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, CCP chincoms are bad. That, yeah, we need to be aware of this totalitarian, fascist, communist regime. For example, I don't think you've interviewed Drew Pavlov and Morgan Jonas. I don't think they have the views on the race aspect of this that you do. Do you feel that you're misunderstood?
Oh yeah, thank you for letting me try to get this out. Definitely. But people don't understand China. That's the problem. And that's why a decade ago I started to realize that we were in deep trouble. So but yeah, thank you for letting me try to get this out. I'm a China bull. China's winning. I see what I can go on tangents, but when it comes to China, that's why when I read Gordon Chang's The Coming Collapse of China, and the stupid Americans, they thought, oh, his last name's Chang. He must know China. This guy has no idea. He knows nothing about China, because what he said was China was going to open up and become a democracy. It never happened. And it's not going to happen. China, if anything, where are we at the moment with this?
You're a bit lost. I want to go. Dave's just happy for me to sort of ask prying questions at the moment.
You asked them quite well. So, what do you think's most likely then? Do you think Australia will fall? Do you think the Australian people will cease to exist, and Australia will basically become occupied by a different people, a different civilization?
Yes. So it is inevitable at the moment. It is inevitable. And the Australian people, when I say the Australian people are woken up, I thought they meant that they are going to all be suffering dearly in the next 15 years, but I don't think they have woken up. Now, what I'm saying is that while we're focused on this massive civilization and trying to collapse their political structure, our political structure is now collapsing. And we're too stupid to see it. Now, why do you think China just put sanctions on us? That's a trade war. It was always coming. They've put sanctions on us because they want to tear apart our political structure. That's their game. It's the game in reverse. They're playing the same game with us.
Especially since, we're still in partial lockdown. I mean, now It's basically we now have 8 different Australias now with 8 different levels of lockdowns because you have some states that have shut off their borders completely, others that have not. Every state is doing something which is ridiculous, and the way that you see it, it's a perfect time for China to slap a tariff on barley, and now they're saying, oh, we might move on to seafood and wine, and we might even put some more barriers to your iron ore. And is the call for, because all the media say this is such a ridiculous thing to get triggered over, that we're calling for an independent international inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus, and China's behaving like that, calling us the dog of the US, and that we're chewing gum on the sole of a shoe.
No, this is basic geopolitics. So I have a model of the world, which is based on geopolitics and the rise and fall of nations. I've read a lot of books on this, and I built my little model. And about 5 years ago, I came out and started my channel, and I started talking about my model and how it's going to play out in the future. All the little day-to-day news that you get is all a distraction. China was always going to try and collapse our political structure. That's the game. And for the people that believe in freedom of speech and human rights, and everyone has the right for democracy and all these other myths, China doesn't believe in that. China's goal is to, and it has nothing to do with the investigation. I want you guys to know that we have been in it's to the point where the incompetency of our government is now a joke. You see me laughing, right? Where it's like a UFC fighter going to jump in the ring and get their head bashed in. I'm just like laughing. I'm dead. I'm in a lot of trouble here. The government has been in a political freeze, a diplomatic freeze with China for over 2 years now. Over 2 years. And only now we're trying to think about how to diversify our trade. How incompetent is that? What we should be doing is focusing domestically. Like, I like how you mentioned Penny Wong, and I think Penny Wong, if she was honest, she would admit that Australia needs to figure out who's in charge of this country. Is like the Malaysians. The Malaysians realize that they control the country and they are the majority. So what they do is they give all the highest paid jobs to the Malaysians. They give all the scholarships to the Malaysians. They don't give diversity targets for CEOs and all this other crap so that immigrants can come here and take our jobs. And so China's not going to play that game either.
Well, China's they know how to exploit us in that regard, and you mentioned that the white guilt that was present in all Western nations, but we've often joked about it in SJW language that only white people can be racist. That it's completely foreign. All of that information is pushed away. That so many other races are racist, not just to white people, but other races as well. You mentioned the Malays and the Chinese. There's huge anti-Chinese sentiment in other Southeast Asian nations, which is not reported on. It's only the whites who are being racist against, or accused of racism against the Chinese.
Yeah, you've given me a few seconds to get my thoughts in order, and I think I want to explain this as well. There's a good saying. It's a great saying. I love this saying. Good times create weak men.
Yeah, you said it before.
I know. And this describes, and no offense to any baby boomers out there, but the baby boomer generation sold out this country because they were weak. They were cowards. They weren't willing to stand up for Australia. And so if you think about it, the baby boomers, they profited from the rise of Australia, and then they sold all their property and they left the CBDs and left it open. They left the richest, most wealthiest, most important parts of our country for immigrants. And then they went out to the countryside. They might have been educated and smart, but then they left their children to grow up in the country and not get educated. And they have no chance of returning back to the CBD. Then what they did was they bought property and they created a property bubble over the last 40 years. And instead of building businesses, focusing on science and technology, and focusing on, that takes a lot, it costs a lot of money to focus on science and technology because 99.999% of experiments fail. But when you hit that one experiment, it's worth billions. But they're not willing to do that. They're not willing to start up businesses. If you speak to a baby boomer, there's only two things that they want. They want to own properties so that they can sit on their ass and rent them out to immigrants. And two, they want all of their money to go in the bank so the interest rate can continue to be high so they can sit on their ass and get and retire well. They're not thinking about the future, and they don't care about the future. They don't care about their children's future. Now we've got that established, and the hard conversation about what the baby boomers have done to this country, and I bet most baby boomers have only just been slapped around the face the last 2 months when people like me have been talking about this is inevitable. This is inevitable. It's just how this is going to play out. So if the Australian people think that they're going to get together, unless the Australian people are going to run into the CBDs and use force to take back the government and put in place policies that protect them now and risk their lives to do so, we are going to continue to go down the path of this country eventually being run, the elites, by the elite Chinese. And I want to tell you guys a little. There was a passage out of the Gulag Archipelago. Have you guys heard of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, right?
Oh yes.
What happened in the Soviet Union? The gulags and everything. They put forward these great thoughts. We want everyone to have free food and free money, and we have this utopian vision for the world, right? And then they started running out of money. Then they weren't productive enough. And it's very similar to Australia. Now, instead of actually becoming productive and being like focusing on making things work, the gulags became inefficient. And there was a point there where in the Soviet Union, what they did was they came along and they just arrested people and took them off to the gulags. And there's a passage that I want the Australian people to just think about this deeply. If everybody fought back when the police came to take them off to the gulags, they never would have been gone to the gulags because they would have been able to take on the police. Now, I'm going to tell you something really scary that I believe to my core. The Australian police are your enemy, and the Australian politicians are your enemy because the gulags will be here, because we have sold out our country and our baby boomers are out in the bush somewhere while our enemy is here. And this is controversial, but I've got a massive machete here. I've got a samurai sword on the wall. I can't buy a shotgun or weapons to protect myself, but I believe in the next 15 years, white Australians will be arrested by our. This is some sci-fi crazy stuff. But Tim, I was telling
this is every day on the XYZ. I'm loving it. Keep going, please.
Okay. Well, yeah. I truly believe that this is our future, and if people are focusing on China all the way over there, we need to focus on our own police coming to arrest us. And I'm ready. I'm ready to get that knock on the door, and I'll be grabbing a machete and I'll be going for them. I'm going to go down.
This ties in. this ties in with my earlier question, then, Dave, because like I was asking you, like, what do you think is going to happen to Australia? Why do you do what you do? Like, it sounds like you do think that we can win. Like, it sounds like you're trying to wake people up.
What I think is, when in the next 15 years, when the three of us are all finished, people might look at it like the Gulag Archipelago and read it like my channel, and they'll be like, "Oh, this guy kind of could see it." And you know,
but what
do you at least want to go down swinging?
I've got a samurai sword on the wall for a reason.
You do realize that we're on air, and there's we're pretty sure there's authorities that are watching this, and if they're gonna arrest Jessica Yaniv for showing a taser on a live stream, they might come for you after this.
You can have a samurai sword.
Yeah, but not for self-defense.
Well, when the gulags start and the police are run by the Chinese elites, I believe that the Chinese will start locking us up. And I'm not going to go down and become a slave for my new leaders because of my stupid, the generation before me sold out the country. I'm going to go down swinging. Why wouldn't I? If I'm going to die anyway. Right? And it's from the Gulag Archipelago. That's what they said. They said if you take out if everybody stood their ground at their doorstep, the gulags would never have arrived. They wouldn't have had enough people for the gulags. And a lot of people think that we have time. I don't think we do. I think that, you know what policy I would put in place? I would put a policy in place tomorrow. And that will be, if I was Scott Morrison, I would come out and be honest with the Australian people and say, look, China has an economy 20 times larger than us. It's a massive economy. You are the richest country in Asia. You are soon to be the Asian hegemon. And you are now bullying Australia, a small little country at the end of Asia. We have done nothing but take care of the Chinese people that have immigrated here. We educate your children. We look after your children. We've done the right thing by you. And we've just gone through fires that have burnt down half the country. Then we have to suffer from a virus that you spread around the world. And now you're sanctioning us. What we are going to do is we're going to remove privileges from the Chinese diaspora within Australia. We're going to take their Medicare off them, and we're going to take any access to the pension. We're going to take that off them as well. And because you just sanctioned our country, so we can't afford to look after your people. So therefore, we need to take the money from them to support our own people. And I think that's just a logical way to do things.
But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, no way.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But if it happened to Malaysia, they would do it. Ask Penny Wong.
We've got another question from James Boom on Entropy. Dave Lee, who is the current Chinese viceroy of Australia? I think he means, who's the biggest Chinese shill in Australia?
I think the more difficult question is which Australian politician has intelligent ideas and wants to support the Australian people remaining the leaders of this country. I think that's the tough question. I heard Pauline Hanson come out, and you know what, when the sanctions came down, Pauline Hanson came out. I thought this was hilarious. She said, we should stop selling milk and milk powder.
Well, make the Daegu shoppers illegal. She's actually said that if a milk powder company want to do a deal to export it to China, she's fine with that, but no Daegu shoppers stripping the shelves.
I get it. I made a video on that. I think all the Daigos should be taxed. They should have to register with the Australian people, and the Australian tax office or whatever, they need to be registered, and they need to be taxed. That's a domestic policy. But Pauline Hanson thought it was an emotional response, which is not what we need. We need level heads right now, not emotional responses. And what she effectively was asking for was to sanction ourselves. I thought that was hilarious. She wants to sanction our own. Imagine how many milk, companies in Australia that want to continue selling milk products and dairy products abroad. And Pauline Hanson's like, let's sanction ourselves. I thought that was hilarious. No, we need to continue trading with China as much as we can, because that's what makes us wealthy, right? But we need to protect ourselves domestically. And in reverse, when China says, well, why did you take the Medicare off the Chinese people within your country? Then what you do is you say, you reverse the Chinese yes. This is how Chinese negotiate. I call it the Chinese yes. What you do is you turn around and you say, it wasn't me. I think it was the other politician. Can you speak to him? And you just send them around in circles. And you just say, sorry, I love China, but it's just domestic policy. This is domestic policy with Australian characteristics, and reverse it on them. We need this, and the politicians have not caught up. They're not innovating. They're not adapting to the current situation we're in, and they're failing. And then what I would do is one slogan, ban WeChat. 2 words, ban WeChat.
What about TikTok as well? Because, well, that's being used by a lot of the white Australian population to, or basically degrade and decay our culture more. We commented on, what was that, the latest TikTok phase a couple of weeks back, the piss pants challenge, where people were pissing their pants as part of a TikTok challenge.
No, it's irrelevant. It is irrelevant, and that conversation is a little bit silly, but WeChat is a super app. Now, WeChat is news, classifieds. It is China has a firewall, and the only way that the Chinese people within our country can contact China is through WeChat, right? So if we ban WeChat, we're effectively cutting off all of the CCP members within this country from connecting with Xi Jinping. Why do you think we're in a diplomatic freeze? They don't need to speak to us. They need to contact their own people within this country to continue working.
Can I just play not the devil's advocate, but the idiot's advocate? We've got to claim the moral high ground. We shouldn't be like China, who censors Facebook. So we shouldn't retaliate with banning WeChat. So how would you respond to that sort of argument? That sort of classical liberal argument?
Okay, no, I don't think that. I think the liberals in America will now agree with me, and I believe if the Australian government does not get on top of this, the Australian dollar is going to collapse with it. And let me explain why. China is building an e-RMB. Now, in the early days, what they did was they discovered Bitcoin, right? They got in the cryptocurrencies. And where do you think they got a lot of that technology from? CSIRO in Australia. They started stealing technology from our universities because, well, we're pretty silly, aren't we? Then they built a platform called Binance. Binance was where you could trade cryptocurrencies. I got into it. I made a bit of money, actually. Almost got a job in Australia trading cryptos. I got really into that during that time. Then they started building a new platform. And that new platform was moving away from cryptocurrencies into digital currency. Then they built inside of WeChat Pay, which is a payment system it's like PayPal, but it's inside WeChat. And Alibaba, it's pretty much the replacement for eBay and Amazon, right? And it's huge, right? They have Alipay. Now, these two payment systems, soon they have a new platform that they are about to release within China that allows the Chinese central bank to issue eRMB in WeChat Pay and Alipay. That is huge. And right now in China, they're experimenting in certain provinces inside China. Now, soon, within the, say, next 2 years, China will go entirely digital currency, you know? And when that happens, they will have the economist's wet dream. You know why? Because they will know every cent that circulates in that country. And when they do that, they will know exactly what the inflation is, what interest rate should be at. You see, part of the problem is there's a black market, there's a cash. We don't know. This is the difficulty with Western countries. It's an old system. We don't know where all the money's going, but China's going to do that. And they're going to continue working towards that. And soon within China, they're going to release that eRMB. And guess where it's going to be distributed? Not just domestically, it's going to be distributed to Australia. And right now, the United States, the reserve currency of the world, they're printing the hell out of it. And if you have a look at what the Australian government's doing right now, they're printing the hell out of everything. And what they're doing is they're socializing. So what they're doing is they're printing the reserve currency so that they have a surplus of money, then they're spending it to socialize their economy. What that is they are buying their own country back by printing money, and then eventually, possibly, the US dollar will cease to be the reserve currency of the world, and there'll be two systems around the world. There will be China's eRMB. And if you think about it, every country that has a Chinese diaspora, they all have WeChat, and WeChat is going to be carrying eRMB. And depending on which is worth more, there's a good possibility that China, because they're the factory of the world, because this is what we got wrong. This is what the baby boomers got wrong, is they think that the currency that they print is worth the products, but it's wrong. The products are worth the money, right? And China is the factory of the world. So what do you think happens? You know, when they release that, there's going to be a two-tier system, and the ability for the United States to print it is going to disappear overnight, and they're going to socialize their own country. Australia.
So you're saying here in Australia, you're going to have a Chinese diaspora who are trading amongst themselves based on the Chinese yuan rather than the Australian dollar.
And we will have to make a decision on what currency we want to run in this country. Do we want in my opinion, the eRMB, which will be worth a ton more than any other currency that we have in this country, you know? And this is how we're going to become their slaves, is because what they will have is the currency that we want. So we're going to have to lick their boots, clean their toilets, and maybe if we're lucky, we will use our WeChat Pay and they'll transfer a little bit to us, if we're lucky. And if you have a look around Australia, WeChat Pay and Alipay is expanding through all of the shops. Have a look out there. This is going to be the currency of Asia. And the most important part of the world is Asia right now. Middle East is finished. If you go to Europe, this place is a museum. These people can't figure out anything. Europe is, forget about that. People still look to Britain to come and save us. No, they're a little bit backwards these days.
It's not Britain anymore.
We're in the future, Asia, and China is the leader of Asia. And they're going to have the Asian currency, which will be the eRMB. So when I piece together all these puzzles, which I haven't, thank you guys for getting this out of me, by the way. There's a lot of research that goes into my outlandish future projections, right? There's so much depth into all of it, right? And this is part of it as well. There's a lot that goes into this, the psychology, there's the economy, you know, there's the history of things and how things, but the eRMB and their platforms of WeChat Pay and Alipay, they're going to be the future. And when they release it, who knows how it's going to play out? But I dare say most of Asia, and also trading partners of China. I believe there's 107 countries around the world that China is their largest trading partner, and there's 90 or even less trading partners that the United States is the largest trading partners. So if you want to compare China with the Soviet Union, I dare say the United States is more the Soviet Union this time around. And also one thing I will say is that instead of printing that money to start up businesses, the United States is printing that money and getting into an arms race. What they're doing is they're building a lot of weapons that they probably will never use. Do you think they war with China? I don't think so. So the United States, how they defeated the Soviet Union was the Soviet Union started spending all of their money on an arms race. What's United States doing right now? They're spending all their money on aircraft carriers and the new F-35 that's worth billions of dollars, and China can shoot it down with $100,000 hypersonic missile. Who do you like? And also the United States is projecting from the United States, they're projecting they want to fight a war all the way over here. That's a longer distance. So when we're comparing the two countries, I don't see any way how the Australian people are going to continue to rule this country for the next 15 years. It's almost impossible when you put all of that together. Imagine Jakarta signing up to the ERMB as the reserve currency of Asia, and Manila, Ho Chi Minh, Bangkok. Singapore's scared right now. Singapore, they got a powerful dollar right now, but they know, because they're Chinese, they know that when China gets their hooks into Singapore, they're finished. Hong Kong, Taiwan, all of these countries will probably have no choice but to sign up to the ERMB so that they can trade, because China's the factory of the world, right? So does that piece together the puzzle a little bit better, right?
I think David is had a live wet dream listening to you throughout this whole show.
It makes sense, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It's all factual. This is all facts. It can be fact checked. This is real. It's all facts. Everyone can just fact check everything I'm saying. I don't have a life. All I do is read about this stuff. So, and I'm
well, a lot of people in the chat are asking about your girlfriend being Chinese. That if you're fighting for the future of Australians, which you've heavily implied are white Europeans. Can you just explain, like, if you're scared that Chinese police are going to come into your apartment, I mean, what if, why aren't you paranoid that your partner could be a Chinese spy?
She knows about the channel. Some people are just good people, and if just say when the British were invading third world countries with barbarians, I'm sure there was a lot of good British people back home thinking, that's not very good.
But isn't she taking a position that a white girl could take?
Does she think like a Chinese person?
Well, she's highly intelligent and objective, and she can see how we're being fooled, right? And what I'm saying is just the facts. This is all I'm doing is pointing out how the country's going to end up. And it's not just the Chinese police I'm scared of. I would never go to China. I'll probably get locked up. I'd probably have an accident if I went to Hong Kong. Even Taiwan is flooded with CCP members that bash people. There's a guy called the White Wolf, I believe, that is a gangster over there. So it's dangerous in Taiwan as it is. But I believe that our corrupt politicians, who obviously control the police stations, I believe that we are going to be arrested by our own people to appease our masters, right?
Well, let's give like next 48 hours after this show will be interesting for you.
Why?
People in the chat went mental when you talked about the machete behind you.
Well,
I also see the boxing gloves. Good man.
You can buy a samurai sword to protect yourself. You see that's the problem with Australia. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have a constitution, and two, we don't have the ability to protect ourselves. So this is not me making a moral judgment. This is me saying, why don't I have the ability to protect myself?
Well, that's a whole other can of worms, but we might wrap it up now. I don't think we probably need to go into other news of the week, but just to sum it up, there was a follow-up article about the National Socialist Network that David and Maddie went through on XYZ Live by Josh Butler from 10 Daily, who's about to be unemployed in a couple of days. His expose was just the rehashed Sunday Herald Sun story, saying that they're also in Canberra and put some stickers up in Sydney.
Yeah, as Maddie and I were pointing out on Monday night, basically these guys have gone around doing peaceful activism. They've done leafleting, they've done postering, and so they're writing about them as though they're violent revolutionary thugs. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. It's just hyperbole.
And there was, a golf course that was vandalized in Cranbourne. I'll bring it up here. This is just sort of summarizing the... Where are we? Oh, here we go here. This is the golf course here. Cranbourne Golf Course vandalized in sickening anti-Semitic attack and also had homophobic slurs. They've showed the swastikas here, but they blurred out this. I'm not sure what that is. But here they've got golf, and you can sort of make that out. It starts with an F, and then it looks like an A, and then looks like a G, and then an S. There it is there.
They're talking about cigarettes.
I didn't realize that I hadn't put it on the screen there.
Oh, yeah.
So this is what your kind of rhetoric, Dave, leads to.
Are you talking to me or to Dave?
Dave Lee. I am gaslighting him.
Yeah, I know.
My rhetoric.
Yeah.
Really?
I can see the images now. Again, Tim, it's just they're putting out propaganda and talking points in the real world, and whenever nationalists do that, like you basically have articles where they basically try to link every violent thing that's ever happened to them, and they're basically just going on a bit of a prank run and a bit of a leafleting.
Well, did you hear this afternoon in southwestern Sydney, there was a car that ploughed into a hijab shop and injured 12 people, including the driver.
Yes, and police have said that they don't suspect terrorism at all.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people on Twitter were disappointed about because they said the driver was of Arabic appearance.
Yeah, you've really got. Yeah, yeah. If it had been an Aussie, it would probably be just a lone wolf mentally ill white guy. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on tonight, Dave. We certainly got a lot out of you. Obviously, you're still vlogging on your own channel, and you also did your first live a few nights ago.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate being able to. I think this is more of a. It's like you guys are my counselors, and I get to I get to get it off my chest.
Live on air.
It's a traumatic thing that Australia is going through right now. It's very traumatic when we have weak leaders, and seeing where this country's headed, and not being, logic not being, or common sense, So yeah, it's true. Thank you for being my psychologist for the night. Let me get it off my chest.
Sometimes we know when to ask questions and just let you talk. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
Good night.